So I want to talk a little bit about that. If you do not have a teenager in the room, I want you to apply this to some of what you grew up with as a teenager, because the teen stage of life is what we call identity formation. Our identity problems really come from our teen state. If you are a parent, I want you to take some of these things, because I promise you everything I put in these slides are things that I heard from every single parent. So just save me some time so I can tell you as always. One thing to remember is that the brain does not finish developing until age 24. We as a culture have said that teens are an adult at 18. There are some responsibilities that come with that are legitimate and they're good, because they challenge teens to transition into adulthood and push them out of the nest, and a lot of those things are good. But if we have somebody who is making a decision that we disagree with at 19, and we answer that the decision that they make with frustration and confusion about why they can't mind it or mad at it, we need to start being a little bit more gracious with the fact that they aren't physically equipped with everything that we're equipped with if we're 25 plus. Now, you and I also know that we could be 36 and still have some immature qualities. But for the most part, they don't know what we know. Their goal is to prove us wrong. And we need to answer that stage with unconditional positive regard, or we're not going to be hurt. There are some things that I want to talk through about some of the real scary stuff when it comes to suicide. There is a difference between people who are suicidal and people who are self-harming. A lot of people will tell you that people who are cutting their wrists, or I had a girl take her fingernails and take a big old chunk out of her skin. This is not a reversal for death. Just because somebody is hurting themselves physically doesn't absolutely mean that they want to end their life. Now, it is something to catch our attention, but if you have somebody in your life that's harming themselves, I don't want you to start grieving their death, because this is two different things that is happening. Non-suicidal self-harm, or NSSI, is really people who don't feel permission to share their emotions. Unfortunately, a lot of times this is firstborns. They have been taught their entire life, I need to set an example. I need to have it together. There's a pressure that I cannot show my emotions, and this is absolutely worse in Christian teenagers, because they are taught you have to love God, you have to trust God, and basically what they're hearing us say is that any negative emotions that you have are invalid, and you need to knock it off. That's not the message that we're trying to convey, but that's what they're hearing when we parent out of fear. When we parent out of our desire to keep them safe, and we start, we've seen all these TV shows and all these things on the news that we're infiltrating onto this group. We're taking some of the very hard things that they're dealing with out of the equation. Teens are brutal to each other. If I had to be a teenager in high school, I would not survive in today's society. So we need to have some compassion with them. If they are suicidal, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to act on it. For general population, suicidal ideation is about 20% of people as adults. The problem is that for teenagers since 2017, that has jumped up another 25%. So we need to be ready to care for them, not try to fix the problem. If you as a parent are having a teen that is struggling with suicide, I need you to get comfortable with the idea that this is bigger than you. You are way too involved emotionally to be able to help in the best way possible. Can you help by listening? And not listening to fix it, but listening to create a safe space for them to vent? Absolutely, that'll help. But they really need somebody else outside of their sphere, outside of their perceived biases, to be able to walk them through that. There are some things that could legitimately be causing suicidal ideation that have nothing to do with how they're parenting. They have nothing to do with how we are parented. One of the kids that I just was ripping my hair out trying to keep alive, every time I looked away, he was trying to kill himself again. We found out that he had been on ADHD medication at the wrong dosage for way too long. And as soon as that medication dosage was switched, it wasn't suicidal at all. The allergy medicine montelukast causes suicidal ideation. Didn't know that until I had some myself. I was like, oh, that packs a punch. Not taking that anymore. And I looked up and it said on the bottle, but did a doctor tell me that? Absolutely not. So the other thing that can make people feel really wacky is that dysbiosis that we talked about, but in particular the thyroid. Thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland here that controls a lot of hormones in your body, and when that thyroid is malfunctioning, that can cause some of these imbalances too. My point is not to tell you all the biology of the body, but to say we as a church have took this position to say that suicide is a spirit of death and that we need to fix this with the Bible. And that is absolutely true from an overview standpoint, but when we come underneath and we start to actually look at the root of these things that are happening, we need to understand that there may be some other very physical things that are causing this. As we all know, teens deal with low self-esteem pretty regularly. You and I deal with low self-esteem. Theirs is completely magnified. So when they are constantly hearing from their teachers, or they're hearing from their peers that their haircut sucks, or that they're fat, or that their teeth are crooked, or all of the things that teens do to each other, and they're surrounded by that environment, and we as a loving parents say, oh, don't believe that, you're so pretty. It's just not enough. It's not enough to combat with that. And so we need to take this community approach and make sure that these girls and these guys are surrounded with love that is bigger than we are. We were never meant to be on our knees to begin with. All right. One of the things that I do see that parents really create a problem with in the teens that I see is when they only parent to a problem. What do I mean by that? We are all overworked, we're all tired. You may have popped out a few kids and are having trouble remembering their names. I don't know. There's just a lot happening in our lives, and you may just kind of be trying to get through the day, and then your teen starts to misbehave, and then you step in to be able to do something. And there's no judgment here, because all of us are really just trying to do the best that we can. But the feedback that I get from these kids is that my parent only pays attention to what I do wrong. And so if you are a very, very strict parent because you want the best for your kids, I understand your heart behind that, but they don't understand your heart behind that, and they are feeling oppressed, and they are feeling like they can never do anything right, and they're giving up. That is the main source of the low self-esteem that we're talking about. Your words become their conscience. We cannot parent these kids to everything that they're doing wrong and expect them to turn 18 and fly high and feel confident in everything that God has given them. Because all of your words are recorded on that tape in their brain, and if everything that they've heard is their mistakes, that's what's going to get repeated in their adulthood, and then they're going to choose the wrong spouse, and then they're going to do things to their kids. This sounds very depressing. I'm probably not talking to any of y'all. I'm talking to all the people that are outside of here. But we feel really powerless, right? We want to help. We want to be able to do something. We want to be able to fix it. But the reality is that no one in here, including myself or anybody else on this panel, has all of the answers for any one other individual. We are dependent human beings, and we need to understand that when we're working with teenagers, that we are just one piece of this puzzle. And the teens that I see do the best in therapy are from the parents who say, okay, I understand where my limits are, and I just want to let go, and I want them to find safety somewhere, even if it isn't with me. And then the kid can establish a positive rapport, and we start talking about the things, and I promise you, they're hearing you, and they're telling me, I know this isn't right. I know that what my parent is telling me is true, But I'm so scared to have something outside of that this is all I know. If you're very, very strict, you're just producing a kid that's a very good liar. Because they don't know how to meet your standard, so they're going to find a way to go around it and hope that you don't find out. So, like I said, I'm probably not talking to any of y'all, but if there's a teen in your life or you know somebody who has a teen that might be dealing with some of these things, I want you to prepare your heart and I want you to clear everything that you know about this person. And I want you to say, God, what does this person need from me? Does this person need me to say something or does this person need me to step aside? Am I making this more confusing out of my own pain? Am I punishing them out of my pain? Am I punishing them out of my powerlessness? Because if that's the case, then we're just adding to the cycle of shame. And they don't know how to believe the best in people yet. They're not a parent to understand your intentions. They only know what we show them. So we have to walk out this unconditional positive regard. I want to give you a quick example of what that looks like. I have a 5-year-old that just lost his first tooth, so if you ever seen the other day, he lied to me for the first time. So I couldn't take care of this. He had a toy out and I said, hey, I got you a new toy, but I need you to pick up these other toys before you play this way. Oh, Mommy, I'm so tired. And I said, okay, well, you don't have to clean it up, but you can't play with any toys with me. So he goes and he steals that toy and he hides it in his bed. Mommy, Jack ate that toy. I go, oh, he did he? So it was in my fear that I was like, this kid just lied to me. This is going to be a pattern. And I started to like rage, just take everything he loves away from him. But what I said is, no, I have to punish to the problem. And what I said was, okay, now that you have stolen that toy from me, and you lied to Mommy about it, that toy is going back to the store, and you have no chance of getting that toy back. These other toys you can play with. Once you pick them up, you can watch TV as much as you want. You know, there was an escalation of, I didn't take all of the hope out from him. I didn't take all of the, even though I wanted to. He had to incrementally feel like, I can improve. If I had taken everything, just, you're going to have dinner, and, no candy for 90 days, and, all of these things, I would have left him feeling completely hopeless. Like, there is no way to earn my status back with the mom that I love and the mom that I want to please because I gave into a temporary temptation. So we have to make these punishments incremental. All right, I want to switch topics over to something that's a little bit more painful for us because we are afraid of it. Let's talk about LGBTQ. We understand what the Bible says about this topic, and we understand that sin is sin. What we don't understand as a community of believers is the consequences of the other things that we have done that have added to a population feeling like this is the only people that they can connect with. What do I mean by that? The advances that we have had in technology, where we have started to say we are going to circumvent disease through XYZ vaccine, actually are contributing to the numbers of homosexuality. This has become a biological thing. And I know that that's not something that we want to hear as a body of believers because it doesn't fit in our compartments. But we are not helping this population by shaming them and treating their sin any different than our sin. We are ostracizing them and we are pushing them further away from God by doing that. The LGBTQ plus population that we know of is 40% suicidal. 20% of those actually attempt to take their lives at least once. What we are doing as a church body and saying, you need to memorize Romans 8, or what's Romans 12? tell you why. I've got this kid who is just a genius. She's going to be a fabulous veterinarian when she grows up. Her dad is very strict and considers her very sinful for identifying as transgender. The reason she's identifying as transgender, though, is because her brothers molested her for several years. And CBS even got involved and had to separate the brothers from her. And she, in not so many words, kind of made a decision to say, all the men in my life are the ones with power. What do I have to do to not feel powerless anymore? I have to identify as a man. This was the only way that she knows how to cope. She is the spunkiest and most, full of life kid that I have met in a long time. And she started to hate God because of how much her dad throws the Bible in her face. And she talked to me one day and she said, who is this God that you serve? Because you're different than my dad. And I want to know what's happening. So I talked to her a little bit about it, and she decided to go to church camp and give it a try. And she got to church camp, and all the kids there called her a faggot. They threw rocks at her. They made fun of her. And she came back to me wondering why in the world I would send her down this path. And I apologized to her, and I cried with her, and I said, I'm so sorry that you were treated that way. That's not the way that this is supposed to go. And so she is still trying to figure out how a God can love her when all of these Christians in her life are telling her that the way that she's coping with the pain in her life isn't the right way to do it. But they're having heterosexual sex on
that part.
We have to start walking the talk. This is a little bit different when we get into the transgender areas that we're dealing with as a church. To give you some clarity, gender dysphoria, which is what the diagnostic manual says, is somebody who feels like they were born in the wrong body. This is a more gradual thing. These are possibly some things to do with some vaccines, but basically these kids just don't feel from early on that they were born in the wrong body. That's gender dysphoria. This transgender epidemic that we're facing as a community is not gradual. It's sudden. And the reason I know it's sudden is because girls are playing with Barbies when they're young, and they're wanting to be princesses. And the boys, are wanting to blow out Tonka trucks and all of this kind of stuff. Doing all the things that they're normally supposed to do, but then what happens? They get into the identity stage formation, their self-esteem drops to a significant degree, and then their parents are meeting that questioning with shame, and they have nowhere else to go but to find the community that the world itself advertises will accept you unconditionally. These people don't care whether I think I'm a teapot. They're going to love me anyway. We need to start competing with that. We need to start accepting unconditionally and not trying to label whatever this person thinks that they're identifying as, because I promise you, every single transgender teen that has come through my office that I have convinced that I love them the way that they are has initiated a conversation with me. I don't actually think that I'm attracted to girls like I thought I was. I have never brought up sexuality to them. All I have done is created a relationship that was safe. So we need to step into that. If we say things like going to hell or what's the matter with you, if we don't create an environment full of empathy, we're actually causing more of a draw to where this LGBT community is actually going to be more appealing to them, and we're making the problem worse. The other thing that we need to remember is that anxiety and depression rates are always higher with GT kids, so are transgender. They don't feel like they fit in anywhere. And it's just kind of the thing right now. So my overview recommendation for you as a church leadership is that if you encounter somebody who's dealing with their sexual identity, I would ask you to look past that. I would ask you to look deeper at that, and I would ask you to look at, what are the ways that you can connect with this person as a person, and to leave that title off, because it's just a symptom of something else. And let's step into loving and creating relationship and creating unity. And from my experience, that identity is going to handle itself. The last thing I'll leave you with is this understanding of how the brain works. There's a really wonderful parenting book called The Whole Brain Child. And basically what it says is that the right hemisphere of the brain controls emotion, the left hemisphere of the brain controls logic and reasoning. When we are emotional, all of us, not just kids, this right hemisphere actually swells and takes over the left hemisphere of the brain, incapacitating logic. This is why when we're angry and we're seeing red, like we know something to be true, we can't do the right thing because we're just so emotional about it. Well, for teens, that flip-flop and that swelling of the right hemisphere is happening so often that they aren't physically capable of doing the things that we are capable of doing when we're not emotional. So we have to meet emotion with emotion. When my son is frustrated that the peas has touched his carrots and he's gasping and he's crying as if his life is in danger, my temptation is to go, this is not a thing. Like, this is you're safe, you're fine. But in that moment, what he needs me to do is he needs me to create safety for him, and he needs me to say, help me understand what you're feeling. What is it that you think is going to happen? Do you think the pea is going to get stuck in your throat? Oh, that does sound scary. Okay. And then eventually he kind of figures it out on his own, and then he goes, okay, I think I can do it. Oh, okay, yeah, give it a try. And it seems silly, and it seems like for those of us who wants to fix it, it's hard. But we have to be patient, because we're coming at these situations with the years of experiences that we have here, and they're going to be a completely different path with these kids that are already from our families. So a big spanking from Julie saying, hey, let's just be nice to each other, and let's not glorify the labels that the world is running with, because ultimately God cares about these other people just as much as he cares about us, and he wants us to look palatable. He wants us to be savory. He wants us to be approachable instead of throwing scriptures at them. And the best example of this is the woman at the well. She had all sorts of problems, right? She represents all of us, though, in some degree. And by creating that space for him to say, I see you, I see the problem, but I see you, it gave her an opportunity to address the problem herself and find freedom. So let's take that position as a community.
Amen.
That is really a touchy subject. And as I was feeling, I'm a feeler. I felt some resistance with that one going on. I just can't do it. It's sin is sin. But you know what I heard? I heard God say, and they shall know me by the love you have for one another. That is what God is requiring of the body of Christ, is to love. Each one, no matter what the sin is, God loved them. He loved them so much that he came and he died so that we could have redemption back to God. And we are God's hands and we're his feet. Yes. We're his mouth. And what God is calling us to is to a higher standard of the call. What Julie was saying, many times, we as the body of Christ, judging people instead of loving people, have wounded people even the more. And God's going, I want you to be like me. He never condoned sin. Jesus never condoned sin. I don't care what it was. Even when he healed them, it wasn't predicated on whether they sinned or not. When the woman was caught in adultery, and the law said she should die, he never condemned her. Matter of fact, he asked her, where are your accusers? In other words, I'm not accusing you. But because your life was spared, go and sin no more. So he addressed it. He knew very well what her sin was, just like he knows very well what our sin is. But he gives us grace. And he, because of his love, he says, with loving kindness have I drawn you. God draws us by his love for us. And his love for us is what compels us to say, God, I don't want to do this no more in my life. I want to change. My husband has a story for you right there.
Now let's give Julie another hand. While Julie was speaking, I remember a situation in Atlanta. Alicia and I were small group leaders. Our group was growing, it real big, right? And Alicia said, honey, I got 2 more guys that want to join your men's group. I said, great, give me the names, give me the numbers. She said, but there's one thing I just want you to know. I said, she said that they're gay. I said, gee. I told her, they're what? They're gay. They no, I can't. I'm not ready for that. I'm not. This is a true story. I was just not there. I had this label. And I heard the voice of the Lord say, son, I want you to demonstrate to them what my love is. I heard it. I couldn't get away from it. So I invite these men to my small group. And we're talking about principles of discipline and so forth. And they would inject some things that it would be absolutely crazy what they inject. And we just laugh and we just love them, we keep them. Just to fast forward, what God did in these men was unbelievable. One of them had AIDS, and God healed him. I'm telling you the truth. The other one that was he God blessed him and he got involved and he had an executive position at Clark University. And he called me one day and he said, Steve, he said, look, man, I got a scholarship that I need to give somebody. You know, anybody with this scholarship? And I said, yeah, my God. And he said, well, tell me to come down here. He said, you got to have a certain grade when I have it. And he told me, I said, yeah, man, she got it. He said, tell her to come down here today. This man gives my daughter a full ride scholarship, including housing. She didn't pay a dime at Clark University. I'm telling you the truth. And you know what that man told me? Brought tears to my eyes. He said, Steve, I will never forget. You love me the way you did. I will never forget the group of men that accepted me and God did a tremendous work. That experience lifted me. I just saw things different from that day on. Let's speak off their invitations and let's love them to death. Let's just love them. Once you look at somebody, let's just love them. Because I want to tell you something. Hear me when I tell you. Hear me when I tell you. They're going to be coming by the droves. I really believe this. God's going to
So what are
send
you going to do, church?
you know, because they're groping, like you just shared, the statistic, 40% of women to commit suicide. That's huge. And I feel that God wants us to be prepared as a church to demonstrate and model to them that your life can be changed. And this is what we are trying to do, you know, through this whole mental awareness event. We desire to put in place people on a track that can lead them to wholeness.
Right.
We feel the responsibility for this. Baby, can I just hit this right quick? I mentioned to you earlier that I got my mental health coach certification. What we're going to do, we are asking for those of you that have a burden, that want to participate in this, we are believing the Lord to build a team that are certified. So we can be, you know, first responders that can respond to the situations effectively. And if you all are interested in joining that team, just connect with me afterwards, because we are going to build a team, and I'm telling you, we're going to deal with this situation. We're going to be on the edge, and I believe God's going to birth a